Hello, this is Chris Kennedy and welcome to the Visual Effects Compositing course, where we're going to add some more sparks here both before the grid falls and afterwards. The idea here is that the sparks wouldn't just jet across like that, they would fall down. So we want to add something that doesn't look like rain, that looks like metal sparks falling, and then as the grill itself falls we want to emphasize that it's falling and has been blown away by having those sparks continue. I'm going to go to Layer, New, create a new solid, call that Falling Sparks. Turn off the visibility of most of the layers and then apply CC Particle World to this Falling Sparks layer. And we can have these sparks begin to fall as soon as the initial sparks appear. So that's around the 1 second mark. We don't really want them to be there any sooner than that, so we'll just drag the layer up here. And now we'll reposition this as we've done before. The difference this time is that I'm going to want this to be the same size as the trapdoor. I'm going to move it up in space a little. I'm going to increase its radius. I'm dragging the X radius across here and the Z radius to make it wider. I could use the Y, but I think I'd rather just have those sparks falling from one level. Now I'm going to reposition that, make it look as though it's in the place of the trapdoor. I drag through the clip and make sure that's staying in that position throughout the clip. And that's not bad, but rather than trying to find a perfect spot, I'm just going to animate this now. So I'm going to drag my resolution down to 1/4 to speed things up. Go back to the 1 second mark, and here I'm going to keyframe the producer positions. And then I'm going to go to about halfway through. And I'm just going to shift that back into place so that it looks as though it's in the right spot. Then I go to the very end and do the same, just keyframe that into position. There it is. So now when we play through, that emitter is in the right place all the way through. Go to Particle, Particle Type. As before, we're going to choose the Textured Quad Polygon and make the texture Spark 1. Now the size of these particles can be a little larger than before, so I'm just going to turn this up. The birth and death size will have fairly similar. And in fact, looking at that, I realized that I shouldn't have dragged that edge up there. I should have dragged the whole clip up to that point because we want those sparks to start there. So that's more like it. And what I like about this is that those sparks fall, and because they're in 3D and the camera's seeing them in 3D, we really get that feel of looking up into that space as we approach it. However, now that we've applied the textured polygon, I can see that I do want to make some changes to the producer. So I'm going to change the Z radius even more, widen that out, and perhaps the Y as well. We'll just have a look how that looks. That really does feel like they're falling out of that space up there now. There's probably too many of them. It looks almost like it's snowing. So let's change the birth rate to 1. Because we really want these to be just fairly occasional. And in fact, one way to make this look more realistic is to change the birth rate all the way through. So I'll keyframe it now, move forward half a second, drag it down to 0, move forward another half second, drag it up a little higher, maybe to 2, another half second, drag it down to just above 0, go to 3.5, and we'll take it round to about 1. And then we want it coming down to nothing around here. So just before we get to the 4 second mark, we'll take that down to absolutely nothing so that the sparks fall away completely by the end of the shot. So if we watch that through now, you can see there's a varying amount of particles as we go. I think there are too many actually towards the end here, because after the grill has fallen, we don't want to see too many. So I'm just going to switch on the animation layer there so we can see where the grill will be. And so I'm happy to have plenty of sparks here, but from this point on, that's probably enough there, and we want to keyframe it down to nothing. So I'm going to drag this keyframe here up to that marker, delete the last one, and then drag this keyframe to here, take the current position indicator to there, and set the birth rate to 0, which means those last sparks will fall through as the grid's disappeared. I'll just turn off the visibility of that again. Now we can watch that through. We have a good rush of sparks as the grill falls, and then the sparks stop. I think that works much more effectively. So we want to export them and blur them as before, but we're going to make a slight change this time. So solo your sparks layer and export. Then I've re-imported that as dripping sparks. Drag that to the timeline. So I'll apply the pixel motion blur. And I'll turn the shutter samples right up for this, because if you look closely you can see they look a little jagged. So I'll change that to 10. Then we get a much smoother look to those pixels. And then I'll add a glow filter, and I'll turn the glow threshold right down and the radius up. Now I'll unsolo these and I'll change the blending mode to add. Now what's slightly different here from before is that I'm going to leave the falling sparks layer in. If I switch it off, you can see that we get those sparks, but they lack a little sharpness and clarity. If I switch on the original layer beneath them, they look really good. Now you can select both of these, hit T, just drag the opacity down a little if you don't want them to be quite so bright. And that's a decision you can make in final compositing. So there, even at 50%, I think they look pretty good. And of course we've made them look quite distinct from the rain. The rain is long, shiny drops, whereas our sparks look much more snow-like, but hopefully with the right sound effects they won't appear to be snow, they will look like sparks. So you can see here they're falling and drifting in a slightly different way to the rain. And if we look at the place where the grill is falling down, that looks good. They appear to be falling in and around it. You get that feeling of them going in front as well as behind. You could, if you wanted, render separate layers and place one behind the grill and one in front, but really using the add blending mode for one and normal for the other does the trick. So with those sparks in place, it's time to head into the final details that will make this look like a complete scene.